Greetings. I am Nerissa Raben B. Endoso, the leader, and we're here to explain the project of our code together with my group, Angeles, Blanco, Polancos, Ronquillo, Saimo, Valencia Mico, Valencia Ken, and Villajego.
Greetings, sir. I am Miko Valencia, and I will be the one explaining the create student method in our program. So first, we defined private fields in the student class, a parameterized constructor named student with int id, string first name, string last name, and string course as its parameters. Getter methods are also present in our program to return the values of ID, first name, last name, course, as well as the enrolled subjects. So proceeding in the create student method, here the program will ask the user to enter his or her first name, last name, as well as the course. Then upon successful creation of the student, um, that student will now be stored in the array list, and then the program will print out student created with the ID and his or her corresponding ID. Also, we included three additional methods. First one is the string checker method. The second one is the in checker method, and the third one is the capitalize every first letter. So for the string checker, it manages the user's input. For example, user must only input a string for the first name and last name. If the user entered an integer, the program will ask the user again for a valid input. This will continue to loop until the user entered a valid input. So the same case for the input, the int checker, if the user entered a string, um, it will loop again until the user input a valid input. And for the capitalize every first letter, this method manages or fixes the data that is entered or created by the user. So let me demonstrate the output on how to create the student. So one, create a new student record, enter first name. So here we will enter the data in a lowercase characters. So we have already successfully created a student, and it is now stored in the array list. So now let's display the details of the student. Enter student ID, which is 1001. So as we can see here, the first letter of the data is now capitalized, because here we only entered uh, the data in lowercase. And upon the display method, the first letter of the first name and the last name is now in capitalized. So that's the function or the purpose of the capitalize every first letter method.
Based on the code, this is the menu driven. The user have 8 options. If the user type 2, the compiler will read the subject class. The create subject method is called on the main class to print the subject created ID. Int ID, string, subject name, and int unit. These three attributes is in private access modifier, as well as we created a parameterized constructor that have setter and getter for subject. I am Mendoza, and I will be explaining the class diagram. As you can see, this class diagram have two classes. The first one is the student and the second one is the subject. And inside the diagram is the class name, attributes, and methods. The multiplicity is one or more because in reality, each student can have more than one subject, as well as the subject can have more than one students that can enroll in that subject.
Hello, sir. My name is Roel Villajego. So I'm here to explain the case number 3 here in the menu-driven code inside the main class. So what happens if the user chooses option number 3, which is enlist a subject to a student? So as we can see here in the case 3, upon choosing number 3, the program immediately prompts the enlist subject to student method, which is originally from the student class. So let's go to the student class. As we can see here, the enlist subject to student method contains a parameterized constructor. So the parameterized constructor contains the students to contain the student IDs, the subjects to contain the subject IDs, and a scanner for the inputs of the user. So after that, the program immediately prompts the user to enter the desired student IDs and subject IDs. So with the help of the in-checker method, we can assure that the user only inputs integers rather than unnecessary inputs such as strings or characters such as symbols. So here's the in-checker method. So let's go to back to the student class. So after successfully prompting the user to input both student and subject IDs, the program will immediately use the method find student and subject method. So let's go to the find student. Here's the method find student, and here is the find subject method in the subject class. So this method is specifically meant for utility functions for searching within a list of students and subject objects. Respectively, this find student method marked as private and static takes an integer ID and list of students as parameters. It iterates through the list using for each loop, comparing the ID of each student with the specified ID. If a match is found, the method returns the corresponding student object. Otherwise, it will returns to null, indicating that the student will with the specified ID is not present in the list. Similarly, the find student method, marked as public and static, performs the same functionality, but for list of subjects, it takes an integer ID and a list of subjects as parameters, iterating through the list to find subject with a matching ID. If a match is found, the method returns the corresponding subject object. Otherwise, it returns null. These methods encapsulate the commonly task searching for object within list based on their IDs, enhancing code modularity and reusability. So you can see here that the method find subject and find student is kind of similar, but except they go contain different list, which is subject and student. So go back to the student class. This if else statement will be explained by Chris Jasper Belitario. That's all. Thank you.
Dangal greetings, Sir Janus. I am Chris Jasper Bibliotario, presenting the enlist subject to student method. So here, if student is not equals to null and subject is not equals to null, it will proceed to this statement, which is not if student is not enrolled to the subjects that contain subject, which is here the method find subject. It will print out that the subject is will be enlisted for the student. Else If the student is already enrolled to the subject, it will print out that the subject is already enrolled in this subject. And else, if student is equals to null and subject is equals to null, the student ID or subject ID that you input was invalid. So here we will try here to code. First is kapag mag-int jando, then decide. So the student created with ID 1001, and if we in this that if we in this the student on that specific subject, ganito siya magiging kalabasan. First is you will enter the correct ID of the student as well as the correct subject ID of the student that you want to list in this. So the subject is listed for the student na. And then if the subject is already enlisted for the student, pag tinry natin, ganito po siya. So, yan na pa yung kalabasan. The student is already enrolled in this subject, which is no duplication, and para mas maging aware yung student na enroll na dun siya dun sa subject na yun. Then next, kapag invalid naman yung in-input nung user. Example, any number. So, the student ID or subject ID was invalid. Dangal greetings sir, I am Chris Jasper Bibiltario, presenting the find student and find subject, how it works. First is the find student method. So the find student method is used to search for a student in a list. Based on a given ID, which is here, and if a match is found, if a match is found, it returns the matching student. It returns to the matching student. Otherwise, it returns to null to indicate that no student with the specified ID was found in the list. Same lang din po siya dun sa find subject method, which is the find subject method is used to search for a subject in a list of subjects based on a given ID. Then, if a match is found, it will return to the subject. Otherwise, it will return to null to indicate also that the specified ID was found in the list. Thank you.
Dangal greeting sir, I'm Matthew D. Simon. I'm here to explain to you the remove subject from student method, in which contains the removing of the subject from the student. So here we use int student ID, which is a variable name, and then we set it equals to int checker. So this int checker is a method for checking if the user will only input the integers. and then we put inside the parameter statement in which enter student ID, and then the scanner. So, and then same goes from subject ID. So subject ID is equals to int checker. So this int checker, obviously the checking for integer values, and then the parameterized statement inside of it, which is remove subject ID and then the scanner. For the next part is student is equals to find student. So this find student is also a method for finding our student, and then we put the student ID inside of it. And then same goes from subject. So subject is equals to find subject, and then this find subject is also a method for finding our subject. So we put the subject ID inside of this method, the find subject, and then that's it. So for the next part, Mr. Charles Angeles will explain the details.
Greetings po sir, I'm Angeles Charles and I'll be explaining the condition we use in remove subject from student method. So here we use a nested if else statement, which is the outer if student is not equal to null and subject is not equal to null. This condition check if both student and subject are not null. If it's true, it proceeds to the if statement, which is if student that enrolled subject that contains subject. This check if the students enrolled subject contain a specified subject. If the subject is found on student enrolled subject, it remove the subject from the student list of subject by calling the student that removes subject parameter subject. This remove subject is also a method which is in here. This line of code, this is it remove a provided subject from a student enrolled subject list. So back into the condition. Next is the else if statement. Exclamation student that enrolled subjects that contain subject. This check if the previous condition, which is the if statement, is false. If it's true, it prints the subject is not enlisted in the student. Then else this run if the first condition is not satisfied or false. If both student and subject is null, it proceeds to else, which print invalid student ID or subject. So here's the sample output to see if our conditions work. So here I already created a new student and new subject record. Then I already enlisted the subject for the student. So here we're going to remove the enlisted subject to student if our first condition is working. For remove, so it should be subject removed from the student. Yun. Subject removed from the student. So our first condition is our work is working, and for the next is we should, for this to see, we will just enter option 4 again. So it should be the subject is not enlisted in the student because there's no more subject that is enlisted. So let's run again the program so that we can test if the else statement is working. So we just need to enter 4, then enter student ID, subject ID, then it should be invalid student ID or subject ID. Bam. And that's all for the remove subject from student method. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jan Cedric Blanco, and I'm here to explain my part in our midterm project in object-oriented programming. My part is displaying the details of the student in main class. This can be founded in in case number 5 in the switch case. Once the user run the program and select the number 5 in the menu driven, it will require the user to input the student ID of the student that he wants to display. We created a method to check or to find the student ID is on the list. We also use if-else statement to check if the condition is true. If the student is unequal to null, it will display the student ID, first and last name, and the course of the student. Else, it will display the invalid student ID. Thank you.
In this code example, we have a method called display all student details that takes all a list of student objects as a parameter. The purpose of this method is to display the details of all the students in the list. The method first checks if the list of students is empty. If it is, it prints out the message, no student details to show. Otherwise, it enters the else block and proceeds to display the details of each student in the list. Inside the else block, there is a for loop that iterates through each student in the list. For each student, the method prints out the student's ID, first name, last name, and course. It then displays the enrolled subjects for that student, iterating over the list of enrolled subjects and printing out each subject's name in uppercase. This method can be used in a program to display the details of all students in a class or any other scenario where it is necessary, to show the details of multiple students, and where you need to display students' details such as in student management system or a class roster.
So in this part, it is for the user to input, and here in the second part, that is the printing of the students. Here, the printing of the display all student details enlisted in a selected subject. Here, user can display the enlisted student in this subject.
And here, in this part of the private static student, find student is the finding student. And here is the method. And here it will ask for an ID to find the student because it is the parameter int ID to find the student. And on the last part, it finding subject. Here it seems to be the same as in find the student. An ID is also needed to find the subject because int ID is also included in the parameter.